The evening was warm, and the hotel lobby was filled with the soft hum of conversations, the clinking of glasses, and the faint aroma of fresh flowers. People had gathered around the grand piano, a magnificent instrument that gleamed under the chandelier lights. It was the kind of piano that demanded attention, and tonight, it would be the center of a challenge that no one could have predicted. The hotel was hosting a special event, and among the crowd was a man whose wealth and confidence seemed to fill the room. Before he even spoke, he had a sharp suit, an expensive watch, and a smile that suggested he always believed he was right. He loved to be the center of attention, and tonight, he had found the perfect way to show off. He leaned against the balcony, laughing quietly, his eyes scanning the crowd with a sense of amusement. Across the room, a young woman moved gracefully among the guests, carrying trays of drinks and plates of appetizers. She was a waitress at the hotel, someone who worked long hours to make a living. She didn't draw attention to herself, and her uniform was simple. Yet she moved with a quiet confidence that came from knowing her job well. Her hands were steady, her steps measured, and she always wore a polite smile. Even when the work was hard. As she served the guests, she noticed the man with the sharp suit. He was speaking loudly, pointing towards the piano, making it clear that he was planning something. People in the crowd leaned closer to hear, curiosity flickering in their eyes. The man was known for making bets, for daring others to do things he thought were impossible, and tonight, it seemed, he had set his sights on her. He called out across the room, his voice carrying over the chatter. "I hear someone here claims she can play the piano," he said with a laugh. "Let's see if that's true. I'll bet $100 she can't even play a single tune properly." The crowd turned towards her, some with surprise, others with amusement. Whispers spread like wildfire. Who was he talking about? The young waitress had never performed for anyone outside of her small circle of friends and family. She paused, a bit startled by the attention. Her heart raced, but she didn't back down. She had always loved music. From the time she was a child, she had spent hours at the piano, learning, practicing, and dreaming of playing for an audience one day. The piano was her escape, her joy, and even though she had never imagined performing in front of a crowd like this, she felt a spark of excitement. The man's laughter grew louder. "Come on, show us," he said, smirking. "Let's see if all this talk about your talent is true. Or maybe you're just another dreamer who can't even touch the keys properly." The crowd giggled, some of them already taking sides, sensing the drama about to unfold. She walked slowly towards the piano, her uniform brushing against her legs, her shoes clicking softly on the marble floor. Every eye in the room followed her, some with curiosity, others with skepticism. The man leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, certain of his victory. The bet was already in his favor in his mind. As she reached the piano, she paused for a moment, placing her hands gently on the keys. The wood was smooth and cool beneath her fingers, and she closed her eyes for a brief second. Taking a deep breath, the room grew quieter as people waited, their anticipation palpable. Even the clinking of glasses seemed to fade away. She opened her eyes and looked at the crowd. There was a mix of expressions. Some faces were curious, some doubtful, and some genuinely interested. She felt a strange calm wash over her. This was her moment, and she was ready to let the music speak for itself. She didn't need to impress anyone with words. Her fingers would do the talking. She began with a simple note, soft and hesitant at first. The sound was gentle, almost shy, but it carried a warmth that drew the listeners in. The man's laughter faltered slightly as he watched her, his confidence wavering for a moment. He leaned forward, trying to hide his surprise. But it was clear that he had not expected the music to sound like this. With each note, she gained more confidence. Her hands moved gracefully, flowing across the keys with a natural rhythm. The melody started to fill the room, wrapping around the guests like a gentle breeze. People leaned closer, their eyes widening in amazement. The music was not just skillful, it was full of emotion, telling a story without words, capturing the attention of everyone present. The young waitress played as if the piano was an extension of herself, her feelings pouring through every chord. She could feel the energy of the crowd, the subtle shifts in their expressions, and she let that guide her. The man who had laughed so confidently now watched in disbelief, realizing that he had underestimated her completely. His smirk had disappeared, replaced by a tense frown. As the melody grew more complex, the crowd began to respond. Soft murmurs of admiration spread, and a few guests even whispered to each other, amazed at what they were hearing. The music was beautiful, unexpected, and powerful. It was clear that this young woman, who had spent so many hours quietly practicing in the corners of the hotel, possessed a talent that went far beyond what anyone had imagined. The music continued, each note carefully chosen, each pause perfectly timed. The young waitress moved with the rhythm, her body swaying slightly, her face serene. She was no longer just a waitress. She had become a musician, commanding the attention of the room with every key she pressed. The audience was captivated, unable to look away, their doubts melting into admiration. The man who had placed the bet now sat rigidly, his mind racing. How had he misjudged her so completely? He had thought this would be an easy victory, a moment to show off his wealth and confidence. Instead, he found himself witnessing something extraordinary. The young waitress was not just playing the piano. She was telling a story that resonated with everyone in the room. As the final notes echoed, there was a moment of silence. The music lingered in the air, leaving a sense of wonder and awe. The guests stared at her, unsure of how to react, before applause erupted. The sound was thunderous, filling the lobby, and for the first time that evening, the young waitress allowed herself a small, proud smile. She had faced the challenge, and she had succeeded. The man with the sharp suit looked around, defeated but trying to save face. He approached her slowly, his confidence shaken. He extended a hand, not just as a gesture of the bet, but as an acknowledgement of her talent. She shook it politely, her eyes still shining with the joy of having shared her music. That evening changed everything. The young waitress who had once been overlooked was now the center of attention. For all the right reasons, she had proven that talent and dedication could shine through, no matter what anyone else thought. And for those who had doubted her, it was a lesson they would not soon forget. The applause had barely faded when the young waitress took a deep breath, feeling both exhilarated and nervous. The room was still buzzing with excitement. Conversation started again, but now the tone had shifted from curiosity and doubt to admiration and wonder. People whispered to each other, eyes still fixed on her, trying to understand how someone they had barely noticed could possess such extraordinary talent. She returned to her duties, carefully carrying a tray of drinks. But it was clear that she was no longer the same person she had been before the performance. The crowd looked at her differently, seeing beyond her uniform and the work she did every day. Their expressions were a mix of respect, amazement, and genuine interest. Some of the guests, especially those who had been skeptical earlier, approached her with smiles and words of encouragement. The man who had laughed at her now sat in the corner, frowning as he watched. He was not used to being challenged, and certainly not used to losing a bet in front of so many witnesses. For the first time that evening, he felt a sense of uncertainty. His confidence had been shaken, and the expressions of admiration for the waitress stung more than he expected. He had thought he was clever, that he could prove a point and have everyone laugh along with him. But the outcome had been very different. Some of the guests began to ask her questions. How long had she been playing the piano? Did she study music formally? She answered quietly, humbly, explaining that she had learned to play as a child and continued to practice whenever she could. Though she had never performed in front of so many people, she spoke with honesty, letting her love for music shine through, and it only made the crowd respect her even more. They were not just impressed by her skill, but by her humility and grace. The man, still seated, called out to her, trying to regain some control over the situation. "Well, that was unexpected," he said, his voice forced to be casual. "I suppose even a waitress can surprise people sometimes, but let's see if you can handle more than just a few notes." There was a hint of challenge in his tone, but it was softer now, almost reluctant. He realized that the crowd had already shifted in her favor, and anything he said could only make him look worse if she succeeded again. She smiled politely at him and nodded. There was no arrogance in her demeanor, only quiet confidence. She walked back to the piano, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on her. Yet she no longer felt nervous. The first performance had been a test, but now she understood that music was about connection, about sharing a part of herself with the audience. She didn't need to prove anything. She only needed to play with honesty. As she began to play again, this time with more freedom, the room fell silent. The initial hesitations of her first performance were gone. Her fingers danced across the keys with elegance and precision, creating a melody that was both soothing and powerful. It was a tune that seemed to tell a story, each note expressing emotions words could not convey. People in the crowd leaned in closer, captivated by the beauty of the music. The man watched in disbelief. Every time he thought he could find a flaw, the young waitress's skill and emotion overcame it. He had never seen anyone command attention so effortlessly. and he began to feel a mix of admiration and frustration. He had placed a bet, thinking this would be an easy victory, but the reality was very different. The audience was now completely engaged, their doubts replaced with excitement and appreciation. Around the room, whispers of amazement continued. Some guests exchanged glances, as if sharing a secret about the extraordinary talent before them. They spoke of the precision of her hands, the way she moved with the music, and how every note seemed to carry a message. There was a sense of collective awe, a recognition that they were witnessing something rare and special. It was not just a performance. It was an experience that left a lasting impression. As the melody continued, the young waitress allowed herself to feel the joy of the moment. She remembered the hours spent practicing alone, the quiet nights when music had been her companion and solace. Now, that dedication had blossomed into something visible, something that touched the hearts of everyone around her. The energy in the room seemed to lift, as if the music had created a bond between her and the audience. Some of the younger guests, inspired by her performance, whispered excitedly about pursuing their own dreams. They saw in her a reflection of what was possible with passion and commitment. The older guests nodded in appreciation, recognizing the years of practice and discipline that were evident in every note. It was a reminder that talent could come from anywhere, and that appearances were often misleading. The man finally stood, unable to contain himself any longer. He approached the piano cautiously, his steps hesitant. He had a mixture of respect and discomfort as he faced her. He extended his hand again, this time not as a challenge or a bet, but as a genuine acknowledgement of her skill. She shook it with grace, her smile warm and genuine, and the crowd seemed to sense the reconciliation of the moment. It was no longer about winning or losing. It was about recognizing talent and celebrating it. As the evening continued, she played a few more pieces, each one met with growing appreciation from the audience. Some of the guests even requested specific songs, and she obliged with a humble yet confident demeanor. Her music filled the room, creating an atmosphere of joy, inspiration, and admiration. It was clear that this performance would be remembered for a long time, not just for the skill involved, but for the story it told about perseverance, humility, and passion. The man, once arrogant and dismissive, now stood quietly at the side, observing the way people reacted to her music. He realized that he had underestimated her in the most fundamental way, judging her by her job and appearance rather than her abilities. It was a lesson he would not soon forget, and he felt a subtle shift within himself, a newfound respect for those who quietly excel in their craft. By the end of the night, the hotel lobby was filled with a sense of satisfaction and inspiration. Guests left talking about the young waitress who had amazed them with her talent, sharing the story with friends and family. She returned to her duties, tired but happy, knowing that she had not only performed well, but had also made a lasting impact on everyone present. The experience had given her confidence, validation, and a reminder that her dedication to music was worth every moment of effort. The young waitress's journey was far from over, but this evening marked a turning point. She had proven that talent and passion could transcend expectations, and she had done so with humility and grace. The applause, the admiration, and the quiet respect she had earned would follow her in the days to come, opening doors she had never imagined. And most importantly, she had discovered that the true reward of her music was not in winning bets or proving others wrong, but in touching hearts and inspiring those who listened. The next day, the young waitress arrived at the hotel feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Word of her performance had already spread, and she could see curious faces from guests and staff alike as she walked through the lobby. Some smiled warmly, recognizing her immediately, while others whispered to each other, trying to catch a glimpse of the woman who had astonished everyone the night before. She went about her work, carrying trays and refilling glasses, but there was a new energy around her. People were no longer dismissive or distracted by her uniform. Instead, they watched her with admiration and interest. The pianist in her, once hidden behind her job as a waitress, now shone openly. She noticed the small gestures, the nods of encouragement, the quiet smiles, the respectful glances, and it filled her with a quiet confidence she had never felt before. The hotel manager approached her cautiously, holding a piece of paper. "I hope you don't mind, but there's a request," he said, his tone hesitant. "Some of the guests from last night have asked if you could perform again tonight. They said they couldn't stop talking about you." She smiled, a little surprised, but also honored. Music had always been a private joy for her, and the idea of sharing it again in front of so many people was thrilling. even if it was also a little intimidating. As the evening approached, the lobby slowly filled with guests, many of whom had been there the previous night. The grand piano gleamed in the soft lights, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The man who had laughed at her the night before was also present, his expression a mix of curiosity and reluctant admiration. It was clear that he had not expected to see her again, and yet he could not look away. She approached the piano slowly, her hands brushing the smooth surface before she settled onto the bench. The crowd fell quiet, sensing that something special was about to happen. She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar connection with the instrument. Her fingers hovered over the keys, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. The energy in the room shifted, drawing her focus inward, preparing her to let the music flow freely. Her first notes were soft and tentative, almost like a gentle greeting to the audience. But soon, the melody began to grow in confidence and complexity. Each note carried emotion, weaving a story that captured the hearts of those listening. The man, who had once doubted her abilities, now watched intently, his previous arrogance replaced by a grudging respect. He had underestimated her, and he was learning that talent could not be measured by appearances alone. The crowd was entranced. People leaned forward, some closing their eyes to fully immerse themselves in the music. The young waitress played, with a sense of purpose, letting the melody express what words could not. Each chord, each pause, each flourish of her hands told a story of dedication, passion, and resilience. The atmosphere was alive with admiration, and even the hotel staff paused their work to watch and listen. She moved seamlessly from one piece to another, each one showing a different side of her musical ability. Some songs were soft and emotional, making the audience feel a sense of longing or nostalgia. Others were lively and playful, causing smiles and quiet chuckles to ripple through the crowd. The young waitress was no longer just a performer. She had become a storyteller, using the piano as her voice to connect with every person in the room. The man who had made the bet watched quietly, his pride slowly giving way to fascination. He could see the power of talent and the effect it had on people. He realized that his laughter and arrogance had been misplaced, and he felt a strange mixture of humility and awe. He could not deny the beauty of her music or the joy it brought to the audience. As she played, she noticed small details in the audience's reactions, the way some people tapped their fingers to the rhythm, the smiles that spread across faces, the quiet nods of appreciation. These subtle responses encouraged her to pour even more of herself into the performance. She allowed the music to flow naturally, guided by emotion rather than technique alone, and the audience responded with increasing admiration and engagement. In the middle of her performance, a small child approached the piano with wide eyes. Fascinated by the sounds, the young waitress looked down and smiled warmly, playing a gentle, playful melody just for the child. The child's laughter blended with the music, creating a moment of pure joy that spread throughout the room. Adults watched and smiled, reminded of the simple pleasures that music could bring, and the human connection it fostered. The evening continued with a mixture of melodies, each one showcasing her versatility and deep understanding of music. The crowd was no longer passive. They were participants in the experience, reacting with applause, whispers of amazement, and expressions of delight. The young waitress felt a profound sense of fulfillment, realizing that her talent was not just about skill, but about the emotions she could evoke in others. As the final piece approached, she felt a surge of energy and inspiration. This was her chance to leave a lasting impression, to ensure that the memory of her performance would linger in the minds of those present. She played with passion and precision, letting the final notes resonate deeply. The room was filled with awe, and when the last sound faded, there was a moment of silence before the applause erupted. The applause was louder and longer than anything she had experienced before. Guests clapped enthusiastically, some standing to show their admiration. The young waitress allowed herself a humble bow, smiling at the audience who had been captivated by her music. The man who had doubted her stood quietly, nodding with respect, finally acknowledging the remarkable talent before him. After the performance, guests approached her to express their appreciation. Some offered compliments, others asked for her story, and a few inquired about her future plans. She answered politely, her humility evident in every word. She knew that this recognition was meaningful, but she remained grounded, understanding that her love for music and her dedication had brought her to this point. The hotel manager, clearly pleased, approached her with a warm smile. "You've brought something special to this hotel," he said. "Your music has inspired everyone here." And I believe it's just the beginning, she nodded, feeling grateful and hopeful. This moment was a turning point, a bridge between her quiet dedication and the wider recognition of her talent. As the guests slowly left, the young waitress lingered near the piano, reflecting on the evening. She realized that music had a unique power to connect people, to break down barriers, and to create lasting memories. Her journey was far from over, but she felt a renewed sense of purpose and confidence. She understood that her talent, combined with her dedication and humility, could open doors she had never imagined. That night, she returned home feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. She thought about the man who had doubted her, the audience who had celebrated her music, and the small child who had smiled so brightly. Each moment reminded her of why she loved music and why she had devoted so much of her life to it. She knew that her path would continue to be filled with challenges, but she also knew that her passion and perseverance would guide her forward. The young waitress fell asleep that night with a sense of fulfillment and hope. She had shared her gift with the world, and in doing so, had discovered not only the power of music, but also the strength within herself. The evening had been more than a performance. It had been a statement that talent, dedication, and heart could shine brightly, no matter where one started or what others expected. The next morning, the hotel lobby was filled with a quiet energy, a hum of anticipation that felt different from any ordinary day. People who had attended the performances the night before returned, hoping to catch another glimpse of the young waitress whose music had captivated everyone. Even guests who had not been there before asked about her, wanting to know when she would play again. The stories of her talent had spread quickly, and her name was beginning to be spoken with admiration. She moved through the lobby, carrying trays and serving drinks, but she noticed the way people looked at her differently now. There was a subtle shift in the air, a recognition that she was no longer just a waitress, but someone with a remarkable gift. Some smiled as she passed, offering quiet words of encouragement, while others nodded in respect, acknowledging the effort, skill, and heart that she poured into her music. The man who had laughed at her initially was seated in a corner, reading a newspaper, but she could feel his gaze. He had not approached her yet, as though he was still processing what had happened the previous nights. When their eyes met, he gave a small, hesitant nod, a silent acknowledgement that he had been wrong to underestimate her. It was the first time she had seen him look truly humble, a subtle change that spoke volumes. Later in the afternoon, the hotel manager approached her with a quiet excitement. "We have a group of guests arriving tonight," he said. "They have requested a special performance. They want to hear you play for them before dinner. I hope you're willing." She felt a surge of nervous excitement. She had never imagined performing for a private group, but the thought of sharing her music with an audience that genuinely wanted to listen was thrilling. She nodded politely, agreeing without hesitation. As evening approached, the lobby began to fill with elegantly dressed guests. The chandeliers reflected their light across the polished floors, and the grand piano stood proudly in the center, waiting for her touch. She approached it with calm determination, sitting down on the bench and letting her hands hover over the keys. The room quieted, and all eyes were on her. It was a moment of connection, a bridge between her passion and the audience eager to experience it. She began with soft, simple notes, allowing the sound to settle gently into the room. The audience leaned in, captivated by the clarity and emotion of her playing. Gradually, the music grew more complex, weaving a story of hope, joy, and quiet determination. Each note seemed to resonate not only in the room, but in the hearts of those listening. The young waitress played with a sense of freedom and confidence that had been building with each performance. The man who had doubted her the most watched silently, a mixture of awe and respect on his face. He was no longer the center of attention, but he didn't mind. Instead, he seemed to understand something deeper about talent and humility, about the courage it takes to stand and perform despite doubt. He observed the audience's reactions, noting how the music brought smiles, tears, and quiet wonder. It was a lesson he would not forget. As the performance continued, she shifted seamlessly between melodies that were tender and those that were lively. Her music captured the full spectrum of emotion, engaging the audience completely. Some leaned forward in fascination, while others closed their eyes, letting the sounds take them to different places and memories. She felt a profound sense of connection with the room, as if the music was forming an invisible bond between her and each listener. Midway through, a gentleman requested a particular tune, one that was famous yet complex. She nodded and began to play, carefully balancing technical skill with emotional expression. Her fingers moved deftly, almost as if they were guided by intuition rather than effort. The audience watched in rapt attention, some murmuring their admiration quietly, others unable to hide their astonishment at her mastery. Throughout the performance, she noticed small, human moments that touched her deeply. A young child clapped with innocent joy, a couple held hands quietly while listening, and an older guest's eyes glistened with emotion. Each reaction reminded her that music was not just about notes or technique. It was about touching people's hearts and sharing a piece of herself through sound. This realization strengthened her confidence and deepened her focus. The man who had laughed so confidently began to approach her cautiously during a brief pause. He did not speak immediately, only observing the way she played, noting the care, emotion, and authenticity she brought to each note. When she finished the piece, he finally spoke in a low, measured voice. "I was wrong. I underestimated you. Your talent is extraordinary." She smiled politely, her humility intact, and nodded in acknowledgement. There was no anger, no sense of triumph, only mutual respect. The performance continued, each piece bringing new layers of emotion and storytelling. The audience was fully engaged, reacting naturally to the dynamics of the music. Some clapped softly during gentle passages, others let out small gasps at particularly moving moments, and a few whispered quietly to one another about the beauty they were witnessing. The young waitress felt the energy of the room, allowing it to guide her playing without being distracted. She had learned that music was a conversation between her and the listeners, and she embraced that dialogue fully. By the time the final piece approached, the audience was completely entranced. She played with confidence and passion, letting the music soar and then settle gently, leaving space for the emotions to linger. The room was silent except for the piano, and every listener seemed to hold their breath in anticipation of the final notes. When the last sound faded, there was a brief, reverent pause before the applause began. It was not just polite clapping, it was heartfelt, spontaneous, and filled with genuine admiration. Guests rose to their feet, some cheering quietly, others calling out their appreciation. The young waitress allowed herself a humble bow, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The man who had doubted her remained standing quietly, nodding with respect, now fully aware of the power of her talent and the impact of her courage. He had learned that true skill and dedication could not be measured by appearances or assumptions. After the performance, the audience approached her to express their admiration. Many asked questions about her background, her practice routine, and her future plans. She answered modestly, focusing on her love for music rather than seeking personal recognition. Her humility only added to the audience's respect and admiration, showing them that true talent could be both extraordinary and grounded in simplicity. The hotel manager, clearly proud, spoke to her privately. "You have brought a sense of magic to this place," he said. "Everyone who has heard you play is inspired. I believe this is only the beginning for you." She nodded, feeling grateful and encouraged. The acknowledgement was meaningful, but what mattered most to her was the connection she had made through her music, the way it had moved people and created moments of genuine emotion. As the night drew to a close, the young waitress reflected on the journey she had experienced over the past few days. She had faced doubt, skepticism, and the weight of public expectation, yet she had remained true to herself and her passion for music. Her performances had not only revealed her talent, but had also created a ripple effect, inspiring others and demonstrating the importance of perseverance, humility, and heart. She returned home feeling both tired and fulfilled, her mind replaying the images, faces, and emotions of the evening. She understood that her life was changing, that the world was beginning to see her not just as a waitress, but as a musician with a gift to share. And though the path ahead was uncertain, she felt ready to embrace it, knowing that her dedication, love for music, and the courage to face challenges would guide her toward new opportunities and experiences. The following days brought a new rhythm to the young waitress's life. The hotel lobby was no longer just a place to serve drinks and snacks. It had become a space where people paused to listen, to watch, and to be inspired. Guests came specifically to hear her play, some requesting particular pieces, others simply wanting to feel the warmth and emotion she brought to each note. She had become a quiet star, known not for her uniform or job, but for the talent and heart she shared freely. The man who had doubted her initially continued to frequent the hotel, observing her with a mixture of respect and curiosity. He had a lot to think about. His confidence and arrogance had been replaced with a humbling understanding that true skill and passion were not to be judged superficially. When he watched her play, he no longer felt the urge to compete or mock. Instead, He admired her ability to touch hearts, a talent that was far more powerful than wealth or status. The young waitress embraced her new attention with grace and humility. She knew her life was changing, but she remained grounded in what had always mattered most, her love for music. Every performance was a chance to share a piece of herself, to connect with people, and to remind them that talent and dedication could come from unexpected places. She was aware that not everyone would understand her journey, but she had learned to focus on the joy of playing and the impact it had on those who listened. One evening, a special event was organized at the hotel, a gathering of influential people who had heard of her talent. They requested a private performance, eager to experience firsthand what everyone had been talking about. The young waitress was invited to play, and she accepted. Feeling a mixture of excitement and nerves, she approached the grand piano, feeling the smooth keys beneath her fingers, the soft light reflecting off the polished surface, and the quiet anticipation in the room. As she began to play, a hush fell over the audience. Each note carried clarity and emotion, filling the room with a story that only music could tell. The melody flowed naturally, moving between soft, tender passages and lively, energetic sequences. She could see the reactions of the listeners, the smiles, the closed eyes, the gentle nods, and it reminded her why she had dedicated so much of her life to music. The connection she felt with the audience was profound, a shared understanding that went beyond words. The man who had doubted her watched from the side, silent and thoughtful. He had come to realize that her music was more than technical skill. It was an expression of the heart. Each note seemed to carry a message, a feeling, or a memory, and it reached every person in the room in a unique way. He understood that he had underestimated her, not because of her ability, but because of the assumptions he had made based on her position in life. It was a humbling and enlightening experience. Throughout the evening, the young waitress played a variety of pieces, each one eliciting a different response from the audience. Some were emotional, drawing tears or quiet smiles. Others were lively, prompting laughter or applause. She was in complete harmony with the piano, letting the music guide her and responding to the energy of the listeners. She felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond recognition or praise. This was the true reward of sharing her gift. After her performance, many guests approached to express their admiration. Some spoke of how moved they had been, others asked about her journey and practice, and a few even offered opportunities for her to perform elsewhere. She listened politely and humbly, grateful for the encouragement, but focused on her love of music rather than fame or fortune. Her humility only deepened the respect of those around her. The man who had made the bet the first night finally approached her. He spoke with quiet sincerity, acknowledging his previous arrogance and expressing genuine admiration for her talent and dedication. She accepted his words with a polite smile, understanding that true recognition was not about winning arguments or bets, but about earning respect through one's actions and abilities. This moment symbolized the shift in perception that had taken place over the past few days, a recognition of talent and heart that transcended status or appearance. In the days that followed, her life began to open up in unexpected ways. Invitations to perform at events, private gatherings, and even local concerts began to arrive. She was no longer simply a waitress. She had become a musician with a growing reputation, someone whose talent and dedication inspired those around her. She continued to work at the hotel, but now with a sense of purpose and pride that came from knowing she was making a difference through her music. Despite the changes, she remained grounded and focused on her passion. She continued to practice diligently, exploring new pieces and styles, and always striving to connect more deeply with her audience. She understood that talent was a gift, but dedication and heart were what allowed it to shine. Her performances were no longer about proving anyone wrong. They were about sharing beauty, emotion, and the joy of music with others. The man who had once laughed at her now became a quiet supporter, often attending her performances and occasionally offering encouragement. He had learned a valuable lesson about humility, respect, and the power of recognizing talent without prejudice. Their interactions were respectful and warm, a reflection of the personal growth that had occurred through this shared experience. The young waitress also began to inspire those around her in ways she had not anticipated. Other staff members and even some guests were motivated by her story, seeing in her a reminder that perseverance, dedication, and passion could overcome doubt and skepticism. She became a symbol of what could be achieved when one remained committed to their dreams, no matter the obstacles or assumptions of others. As time went on, she performed for larger audiences, but she never lost sight of what mattered most, the music itself. Every note she played was a reflection of her heart, every performance a connection with those who listened. She continued to carry herself with humility, grace, and a deep respect for the art that had given her so much joy and purpose. One evening, after another memorable performance, she sat quietly at the piano, reflecting on how far she had come. She remembered the laughter, the doubt, the challenges, and the small victories that had led her to this point. She realized that her journey was not just about talent, but about courage, perseverance, and the willingness to share herself with the world. Music had transformed her life, and in turn, she had touched the lives of others in a way that was meaningful and lasting. Her story spread beyond the hotel, shared by those who had witnessed her performances and inspired by the message it carried. People spoke of the waitress who had amazed everyone with her music, the woman whose dedication and heart proved that talent could be found in unexpected places. Her journey became a reminder that assumptions based on appearance, status, or occupation were often misleading, and that true greatness was measured by passion, skill, and the ability to inspire. The young waitress continued to perform, her love for music growing stronger with each passing day. She had discovered not only her own abilities, but also the power of sharing those abilities with the world. Her life had changed in ways she had never imagined, but she remained humble and grateful, focused on the joy and connection that music brought to both herself and her audience. In the end, the story of the young waitress and the man who had doubted her became a tale of inspiration, a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the transformative power of passion and dedication. She had faced skepticism, risen above doubt, and touched the hearts of countless people with her music. Her journey was a living proof that talent, combined with humility and perseverance, could overcome any obstacle and create moments of genuine wonder and connection. And so, every time she sat at the grand piano, the young waitress played not for fame or recognition, but for the joy of music itself and for the people who listened with open hearts. Her performances became a celebration of talent, courage, and the human capacity to inspire, leaving a legacy that would continue to resonate with everyone who had the privilege of hearing her play.